Audiophiles, you're wasting your money. Seeing as most audiophiles seem to be filthy rich, it probably doesn't matter how much they waste. Not that I have a problem with anyone being filthy rich, as long as their wealth was gained legally. Enjoy it while you can. You can't take it with you. But people generally don't get rich by wasting money. So what I have to say here will help all audiophiles, hi-fi enthusiasts, and possibly home recording studio owners too. What set me off here was a bit of a throwaway comment I made in a recent video. I said that if your equipment was better than your hearing, then there's no need to upgrade. You won't hear the difference. I said this mainly in the context of how the ear's high-frequency response degrades with age, no matter how well you look after your hearing. But I can imagine that this applies to all of the various parameters of hearing. I'm not an audiologist, but I'd certainly guess frequency range, flatness of frequency response, balance between the ears, sensitivity to localization. I'd be pretty certain that these are all factors and more. But also, I think that people will have different sensitivity to detail in sound. I mean this in the ear itself, other than the attention the brain pays to the information it receives. So what I'm saying in a roundabout way is that some people hear better than others. I have a simple demonstration that this is true. Some people have perfect pitch and they can recognise a musical note without any reference. So if I play this note on a piano, I'll play it again. Some of you will know what note it is. You won't have to think about it or compare it with any reference. You'll just know. Here it is again. What note is it? Okay, it's A flat. That's what my school music teacher played for me to test whether I had perfect pitch. And my answer was A flat. Yes, I got it right. But I just guessed. A 1 in 12 shot. I should have bought a lottery ticket that day. So this is a real thing, and I see no reason why some people having the ability to hear more closely into sound shouldn't be a real thing too. And, as I've commented several times recently, some people seem to be able actually to hear the value in a $1,000 interconnect. Whether they can see and hear the value in a $1,000 HDMI cable is another question entirely. And there are such things. No, I don't believe anyone can really hear the difference between a $10 cable and a $1,000 cable. But if anyone truly knows, I mean knows that they can, then good luck to them. Or rather, bad luck, because they'll be dissatisfied with anything less than the best. And maybe they can't afford it. Poor audiophiles perhaps do exist. Or perhaps they started rich, became an audiophile, then their lust for better and better equipment made them poor. But let's bring things down to realistic levels. As we know, 99% of statistics are made up on the spot. But I'd hazard a guess that the proportion of people who can hear benefits in cables costing over, let's say $100, is less than 1%. 0.1%. This means that you can't hear any difference, probably. Buy adequate, decently made cables and they will be better than your hearing. This is my point. If your equipment is better than your ability to hear any difference, you don't need better equipment because it will give you no benefit in terms of enjoyment, and you will waste your money. So where else can we go with this? I know I'm going to stir up controversy here, but I'm just putting ideas into the air. If you don't agree with me, then that's fine, but I hope you will at least consider my points. So let me turn to power amplifiers. Yes, power amplifiers do sound different. I know that because I had the opportunity to compare 3 professional amps closely. I can only remember that one was a Turner, but the others were also top pro brands. They sounded different, so clearly my hearing is, or at least was, better than these amplifiers. Or better than 2 of them. I don't know how I could have known which one was the most accurate. I'm going to throw something else in here. These amplifiers did sound different, but not by much. If I hadn't been able to compare them quickly by swapping over the speaker cables, which had connectors, and having someone else to do that, then I wouldn't have spotted any difference. I do believe there's such a thing as a difference that doesn't make any difference. Like whether your supermarket eggs are brown or white. They're different, but they poach just as nicely. But that's professional audio. What about hi-fi? Well, I did have an occasion when I could hear power amplifiers that were distinctly different. There was a time in my life when I owned a pair of Leek TL12 tube power amplifiers and a quad 303 transistor. Tube? I'm British. Shouldn't I be saying valve? Well, I'm of an age that I can remember transistors being new and exciting. Tubes were old and boring. Old duffers would gather around tables in smoke-filled rooms, and the conversation would be valves this, valves that, valves whatever. So to me, valve is an old geezer's word. Some might say that I should have grown into it by now. But tubes, thermionic tubes, I think I'll stick with that. Back to the amps. Yes, the leaks and the quad did sound different. The key was in the bass. The leaks were only 12 watts apiece, TL12, and by the time you'd got them up to a reasonable volume, you could hear distortion in the bass. This is because of the transformer output. Transformers magnetically saturate at high levels, and this is worse at low frequencies. It wasn't all that much, but I didn't like it. I preferred the quad. As an aside, I half remember testing the Quad 303 against a different amp, and I remember feeling that it didn't seem to have as much control over the speakers. Possibly a damping factor thing. Now, some people like tube power amps. They like the sound. That's okay. It's okay to have personal preferences, and I'm not going to take anyone's preferences away. But I'd say that listening to all of your music through the tube sound is a little like going to an art gallery wearing tinted glasses. Who'd want to do that? But in my examples, I'm talking about the past. We're in the present now, as you might have noticed. There's no reason a power amp couldn't be better than nearly everyone's hearing. And almost no one can hear any kind of a difference that really makes a difference, considering, of course, amps that are sold into the genuine hi-fi market or professional audio. You can pause the video now to make your comments. There's more stuff you'll want to comment on coming up. There's other equipment that's going to be better than your hearing too. In hi-fi, you'll need a preamp. I'll just mention that integrated amplifiers have the preamp and power amp in one box. My suspicion is that more people will be able to hear differences between hi-fi preamps because they're more complicated with their tone control, stereo balance, loudness and stuff. In digital audio, I reckon that digital to analog converters are pretty much as good as most people's hearing. In hi-fi, you'll often hear the term DAC, D-A-C, digital to analog converter. In pro audio, we call them D2A converters, but it's the same thing, just in different packages. In the early days of digital audio, yes, you could hear differences between converters, mainly in the form of problems, noise, distortion, granularity. But again, we're living in the present. We've had 50 years of digital audio to perfect converters, if not to absolute perfection, but to a point better than the limits of most people's hearing. And don't forget that inside that shiny, beautifully designed case, there's a D2A chip from one of the same chip manufacturing companies that everyone else uses. OK, there are high-end DACs too, but again, I suspect that very few people can hear enough detail to be able to tell any difference. Let's move on to a place where we can sort out the men from the boys and the women from the girls. Turntables. Turntables are interesting because there's a whole spectrum between cheap and cheerful and amazingly beautifully engineered equipment that really does get the best out of the vinyl medium. I'm going to turn this around, and rather than start from the cost of the equipment, let's think about the value of your hearing. Of course, your hearing is of infinite value to you, but if we could measure your ability to hear details compared to the price of turntables, you'll see what I mean. Let's suppose you have $80 hearing. What I mean by this is that all of your listening needs will be satisfied by a Crosley, and any better or more expensive turntable will be nothing more than, to use an expression, pearls before swine. Realistically, I think anyone with healthy ears has better than $80 hearing in terms of detail, but you never know. Where's the top end? Well, I'm sure you know that there's practically no limit to what you can spend on any item of hi-fi equipment. But there comes a point where nothing gets any better. So you can spend X number of pounds or dollars and get the best that's technically possible. Or spend 10 times X and get no better sound, only better and bigger bragging rights. Where the price point is where things top out technically is a good question, but I'm going to put it at around £5,000 GBP, or the equivalent amount of dollars for a turntable. My thinking here is that this is the cost of a Riga Planar 10, the top of their range. I once went to a Riga demonstration and had the chance to listen to and talk to their people, and I'm convinced that their business is simply to make great turntables at a range of price points starting around £300. I'm getting my prices from Google, by the way, which, seeing as I'm not going to be buying anything today, seems as good a source as any. For the Planar 10, we seem to be looking at around £5,000, depending on options. That's close enough. So going back to ears, I believe that some people really do have £5,000 ears. Or let's call it $5,000 ears, because pounds sounds too much like excess weight. So to someone with $5,000 ears, any cheaper turntable would be audibly inferior to the Rega Plain-R10. Conversely, any more expensive turntable won't sound any better, because the Plain-R10 is as good as things get. This might be another opportunity to pause the video and comment. I've chosen this turntable rather arbitrarily, and some genuine hi-fi enthusiasts may be able to give their opinions on what is the exact turntable beyond which, in price, nothing sounds any better. But please stick to turntables that you own or have heard. And so we have the spectrum of hearing fine details in audio. From those fortunate few who have $80 ears and are perfectly happy with their Crosley, to those who have $5,000 ears and can appreciate all the benefits a Rega Plain-R10 brings to their life, if they can afford it. In between, there'll be people who have $500 ears, and a low-end budget but genuinely hi-fi turntable will satisfy their needs. Some people may have $2,000 ears, but have bills to pay, mouths to feed, and they can't achieve a sound that suits their needs. Oh, well. I could at this point turn to cartridges, tone arms and turntable preamps, but it won't add anything to my argument, so I'll leave these for a future video. And so we need to come to the elephant in the listening room, the elephants, the loudspeakers. If I come back to the title of this video, Audiophiles, you're wasting your money. So don't waste your money, invest it in what's going to give you the most pleasure. Your ears can only hear so much detail, and as I said, some people are bound to hear more than others, some less. Most of us, I imagine, are near the centre of a Gaussian distribution. So when you have a source that's better than your ears, and amplification that's better than your ears, and a turntable that can get more detail out of vinyl than your ears can appreciate, then you can invest, not waste, your money on speakers. Speakers are different. It is my thesis that other equipment is so technically advanced that it's possible for anyone, almost anyone, to buy stuff that is either better than their hearing or as good as it's possible to get. But there's no such thing as the perfect loudspeaker. Time to pause again and comment. Do you think there's a perfect loudspeaker, in the sense that it would be perfect for everyone, not merely to your own taste? If you think that there is a perfect loudspeaker, and you've heard it or own it, let us all know in the comments. I'll tell you another of my little stories. I was at a hi-fi show with a hi-fi enthusiast friend, and we were listening to a pair of Wilson audio loudspeakers. No, that's not quite right. We were listening to a Bruckner symphony played through Wilson audio loudspeakers. It's controversial, I know, but really, it's all about the music. Hi-fi is just the medium. But I digress. It was all very nice. The main issue, though, was that the room was conference room sized. Well, it probably was mostly used for conferences, so that makes sense. But it wasn't big enough for a Bruckner-sized symphony orchestra. So, although the sound seemed adequately big, there was a disconnect between the sound as heard and what the Bruckner experience should be. I'll remind you that I am a concert goer. More Mahler than Bruckner, but I know what this music should sound like. Then as we left, we heard a piano playing around a distant corner. Hey, let's go listen to that, one of us said. I think we were tiring of all the hi-fi we'd heard on the day, and some real music would be a relief. So we found the room, but no piano. Instead, a pair of quad ESL 63 electrostatic loudspeakers, placed sensibly well away from the rear wall. To the level of detail that my hearing is capable of, it sounded like a piano, and I've heard pianos in concert. I've played on Steinway, Bechstein, Bosendorfer. It could absolutely have been a real piano. I wasn't able to listen for long enough to be sure, and other people weren't listening silently, as at a concert. So I can't say 100% that it would have fooled me if blindfolded. I think probably the geometry would have been the first thing to give it away. But it sounded good. Like a piano. So where can we go with this? Well, it wouldn't be a bad idea to visit a hi-fi dealer. I mean a genuine hi-fi dealer, not a box shifter. Or a hi-fi show, but you'll probably not hear so much of the more reasonably priced models. Or you can do your research and see what the professionals use, particularly in mastering studios. I might narrow that down to mastering studios that are known to handle your favourite genres of music. The louder is better kind of mastering might not be the best guide. You'd be taking a chance buying speakers based on what other people use without hearing them yourself. But you'd be taking a chance anyway, unless you've heard them in your own listening room. So you will be making a choice. Research speakers down to the last detail, and by research, I mean listening. or buy on the basis of what the experts use. The only other alternative is guesswork. But let's look at the positive here. Your hearing, the level of detail you can hear. I would argue that for most people, it's better than even the best loudspeakers. Loudspeakers all sound different to each other, and most people will be able to hear that difference. And so, when you've nailed down every other piece of equipment to what's better than your hearing, or what is as good as the highest standard of technical excellence, then you can truly practice the art of being an audiophile. You can hear the differences in loudspeakers, and you can learn and develop your preferences. And the true audiophile might experience loudspeakers like they would their expensive, fancy cars. Find a model you like, buy them, then live with them, learn their virtues and benefits, strengths and weaknesses. Enjoy the texture of reproduced music. Then when you feel that you've learnt all there is to learn from these loudspeakers, trade them in for something new and interestingly different. This is of course why you have to be rich to be an audiophile, but you're not wasting your money. You're investing it in your hi-fi experience. And although I've been making a bit of fun of rich audiophiles, a decently high-quality experience is available at lower price points. Doubtless you've paused and left several comments already, but before you go, I'd like to ask a few questions. Have you ever wasted money on hi-fi equipment? Do you have any equipment that you feel is too good for your ears? How would you go about choosing loudspeakers? See you soon.